So, although I do encourage you to consider having snacks as a way to stabilize your blood sugar during the day between meals, I think that it's important to differentiate kind of what your expectations might be with respects to a meal versus a snack. And so, i- in my opinion, meals should be really rewarding. They should taste great. And they should also be healthy in that they should have your full set of vegetables and starch, protein, and fat. The snacks, on the other hand, though, don't need to be all that rewarding as a taste, and perhaps even should be fairly unrewarding. And so I mentioned this earlier as a way of helping to control your caloric intake. And um, I think that it, the idea of your diet is that it should be rewarding, it should be fun, and it should taste great. Um, but it's difficult to control your caloric intake if your snacks taste too good and if they're too easy and so on, if they're too much to your liking. And so um, if you want to focus on making sure that your life and that your diet is rewarding, then focus on making your meals really taste even better than you would expect, or so on. And conversely, if you're having trouble with weight gain, don't make your snacks be even less tasty and less tempting and less easy to reach and so on, and make them require more work. And that way you can still have a rewarding experience with food on a daily basis, um, and but at the same time control your caloric intake without depriving yourself. So looking at what you might want to have for your meal, there are countless good choices. Stir fries, fried rice, curry, pasta, sandwiches, the list goes on. Where I would say you should be careful is with the idea of having a salad for your meal. Lettuce has practically no calories, and so when you have a salad, you generally have no starch, and therefore you're not getting a very balanced meal. You're not getting any sugar, and you're not going to have sugar for the hours that follow that meal. So often people end up making this drastic decision: I'm going to eat something that has no calories practically, and then they compensate by adding tons of salad dressing and other things that are you know not particularly good sources of calories. The salad dressing is often very sweet and fatty, perhaps, but again, having fat with uh, by itself or with a fast sugar doesn't really help to slow down the digestion all that much. So salad is often, I think, a bad choice. It should be an accompaniment for your meal. But in general, though, looking at all these choices that were listed at the top, you do need to make a switch to whole wheat bread, basmati rice, and protein-enriched pasta or whatever pasta that you find is tasty but has a fairly low glycemic index. This really does make a very, very big difference, and it's the difference between having a meal that's digested and where all the sugar is turned to fat because it came in too fast and too strong, and having then a sugar low a couple hours after your meal or not. So looking at your vegetables, cook them less. Crunchy vegetables are good. They're better for you. They'll get digested more slowly. Um, and again, it's a question of habit and of establishing and of building a palate that where if you're used to eating mushy stuff right now, for sure you might be a bit queasy at having stuff be crunchy all of a sudden, but once you get used to it, you'll definitely prefer it. So it's better in general to avoid boiling your vegetables just because the water that you boil it in ends up leaching a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you want to have in the meal. In general, really try to avoid the sweeteners that people are using. American style mustard is just basically sugar, and it has very little taste compared to, say, Dijon mustard. There's a reason why people in France use Dijon mustard. It's because people, because they're looking for ways to add taste that are more concentrated, where you don't need to add, say, 20 grams, sorry, exaggerating, but say 5 grams of sugar in your mustard in order to add some kind of taste that's desirable. You're adding something else than sugar, right? Um, Real mayonnaise is actually, really quite good. It's largely vegetable fat. There are you do put some egg yolks, but that's a pretty small proportion of the volume in mayonnaise. The one thing that's really a shame is that because people have gotten used to low-fat mayonnaise, which is basically all sugar, um, or people have gotten used to mayonnaise being sweet. So when you buy Kraft mayonnaise now, it has 2% sugar in it, which to me is really gross. But in any case, make sure that you have some fat with your starch. So, but at the same time, adding fat, if you've been eating low fat, zero fat as much as possible up till now, you have to realize that when you add the fat back in, that fat, as I mentioned before, is extremely dense calorically. So if you have a little bit of fat with your meal now, you should be eating a lot less because it's denser, but normally you should be feeling satisfied and satiated much faster as well. So within the context of stabilizing your weight and not putting on weight, not even considering the question of whether you're trying to lose weight, there's still the question of exercise. And so in my experience, I've found that I can be extremely sedentary over a period of a few months and get away with it really. But at a certain point, I do start putting on weight. And perhaps if I cut out entirely all the fast sugars that I ever eat and really focused on that, that I might be able to be completely sedentary and not put on weight. But it's actually really difficult. And it really doesn't take much just to be break even. Really, just doing a little bit of walking is enough. And the more you bust a move, the easier things get. And so if you can be at a habit of exercise, and even if it's just walking, you can then kind of make things just so much easier, because then you can have fast sugars from time to time. You can have a little bit of stuff that you probably shouldn't, and you can get away with it and be also healthier in a number of different ways. Okay, so we're finally in the last section, losing weight. So up until now, our focus has been on making sure that we have just the right amount of nutrients throughout the day as much as possible. And in particular, that we don't have a surplus or a major excess of nutrients getting released into the bloodstream just at once. So, so that being said, what are the main ways to lose weight, and let's compare them against one another. So the first approach we'll look at is the standard low-calorie diet, form of starvation. And so I don't particularly recommend it because, on the one hand, I've never been successful with it, but also because it's very painful and unpleasant, and it takes a very long time to take effect. And so the idea of being unhappy and in difficulty for months on end is really not a very attractive one. It's also often unhealthy, since it's hard to get all of your nutrients. But more than that, it's just a question of how your body adapts to starvation, and how the stored fat that we have is there largely for really dire emergencies and for exercise. And so the idea that we'll be able to consume the stored fat when we're at rest really doesn't fit with the way that the body works. And beyond that is the question of how you're going to be able to be the kind of person you want to be. Where do you get the energy and everything else that you need to be this kind of person when you're following this kind of diet for months on end?